Hi, I'm Lisa Dahl, Health and Wellbeing Coach, and welcome to Getting Healthy Without Rules. This show is about understanding the things that impact your wellness and finding ways to improve it. This show supports a non-diet, no-rule approach to health and wellness. Health and wellness is a moving target, and we all have different needs and opportunities. This allows you to make the best choice with the information that you have right now. It helps you to be present, flexible, and resilient. In addition, I support you from shifting from judgment to curiosity and offering yourself self-compassion. It is time that we are all a little bit kinder to ourselves. In this show, we have discussed different aspects of our lives that impact our health and how so many of them are interconnected. In today's episode, we dive deeper into food. Specifically, we're going to talk about neighborhood farms and community-sourced agriculture, the many benefits of selecting locally sourced and in-season foods, how to use a seasonal calendar to plan recipes and meals, what plant-forward means, and how connecting with farming and nature can positively impact our overall well-being. Be sure to stay until today's practice about how to become more plant-forward, and it doesn't require you to eliminate anything that you are eating today. Today, I am privileged to introduce you to my colleague, friend, food truck queen, and family member of Nourse Farm in Westborough, Mass, Registered Dietitian Catherine Nourse. She has one of my favorite introductions that I have read so far. Catherine describes herself as someone who loves food, eating it, making it, studying it, connecting with it, and she loves sharing food with folks. Since moving to Massachusetts, she has explored ways to combine, stir, mix, blend, marinate, all of her food loves, and finally found it. Catherine believes that Veg Out at Nourse Farm is truly a vehicle, pun intended, that combines all of her food loves and affords her more opportunities to connect folks with foods that nourish them in fun and yummy ways. I met Catherine 10 years ago, never dreaming that I would have the show and that she would be my guest. Catherine, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you.
It's come such a long way.
Yes.
So I understand the Nourse Farm is the 15th oldest continuously operating family farm in the country and steeped in history. How did the Nourse Farm come to be?
That's such a great question. And so last year, Nourse Farm celebrated its 300th birthday, and we're about to kind of tick the 301 box this year. So way back in 1692, there was a woman that some people here in Massachusetts may have heard of named Rebecca Nourse. Rebecca Nourse was the oldest accused and hanged woman during the Salem witchcraft trials. And as a result, a lot of her family members decided to leave Salem and Salem Village. And one of her children, Benjamin, was one that settled in what's now Framingham. And two of his sons, William and Ebenezer Nourse, are the two brothers who founded Nourse Farm in 1722. So they, as they say, go west, young man. They did. They made it all the way to Westborough and set up their first camp in the area that's still farmed today, 300 and almost 1 years later. So.
Wow. I had gone onto your website and saw that, and I was like, never knew any of that history. So it's super exciting and such an interesting tale to continue to share.
Well, and it's really nice, too, in terms of when you think about the heritage and when you think about the family connections. Currently, working at Nourse Farm are members of the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th generation of family members. So there's a lot to be said in terms of that value that having a true investment in the land and in its products, and in our case, produce, really has. So from that optic, we feel really fortunate to have that heritage and to, as the mother of one of the 10th generation members, it's really great to see the pride that my own child has in getting to work summers for Farmer John. So it's a pleasure and an honor.
It's really interesting, and just the connection in the community, and you can see it when you talk about it, that you can feel it from inside your heart on how much the experience means to you.
Oh, thanks.
How did you become interested in nutrition and becoming a dietitian?
Well, let's see. I love food. I think you mentioned that in my intro. So I love food, and I think that as someone who's lived in different parts of the world, in different parts of my professional career, food is the one thing that really does unify people. We all eat food. We all need it. And I think that we should all be able to enjoy it too. And so when you think about the needing part, right, the nutrition, right, we have to get the energy and the nutrients from our food in order to live, in order to grow, in order to play, in order to rest. And so when we think about it from that aspect, that's where the nutrition really comes into it. When I think about it in terms of as a way to really connect with people, food is a great way to do that. And so from the optic of getting to study it and becoming someone who understands what a macronutrient is and what a micronutrient really can do for you and all of the things in between, that has been something that I've really appreciated. I love science, and so nutritional science is something that is very near and dear to me. But the other part of it, the social, the emotional, the intellectual and the physical aspect of it all, eating, is the other piece of it. And so to be able to combine lots of things to make that recipe for my own success has been a way that I was initially interested in nutrition, left it for a while, but again, we all eat food, came back to it and specialized in it as a registered dietitian. And now I get to work at a point of production at a local produce farm. So I really feel like I have a broad spectrum of production to consumption and everything in between.
It's just such a unique path as a registered dietitian, and to be able to, yes, you know the science, you love the science, and you also recognize the joy and the importance of shifting it from a science to community and connection. And that's where we start to be able to have the love of food.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing that I've really come to appreciate over the course of getting to work at Nourse Farm. Everyone there gets to talk to me. Sometimes in the hospital, my patients would be intubated or sedated. And so there wasn't that same connection. But being able to have the opportunity to either share a love of food with somebody who's there or expose someone to a new opportunity, like I've never had kohlrabi before, or what can I really do with all of these beets or Swiss chard? So there's a real opportunity that exists, and I'm so appreciative of it.
Yeah, you're more on the proactive side, and education and people are coming to you for that exciting information, not just because they have been told they have been diagnosed with this thing and now have to do all of these things that are super challenging to follow.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think to speak to the point that you just talked about, right, eating without rules and the curiosity factor, that's definitely a component of what we love so much about being at a produce farm, because there is that opportunity to be curious and figure out, again, what can I do with 8 pounds of kale?
It's a lot of kale. That can also be frozen and used in multiple ways.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
How has working on a farm contributed to your understanding of food and its impact on health and wellness? Kind of going back a little bit to what we were just touching on.
Sure. So I think, again, we know the research that's out there, right? The USDA came out with research in the early aughts that said when people are better connected to the origins of their food, they're more likely to consume it. Well, that's great, because as a dietitian, I know that most people don't consume as many fruits and vegetables as are recommended by science. So what do? Well, the biggest thing is you make it more fun, you make it more accessible, you make it more delicious. And so you're able to meet people where they are, help them understand not just the origin of their food, but how to prepare it to enjoy the meal or the snack or the nibble that they might be having. And then really come to understand that working at a produce farm, you're able to understand what's going to taste best in the right season, so that, again, connecting to that origin of the food, connecting to what's going to make something that much more flavorful. And then hopefully, if it's more flavorful, people are going to eat more of it. So again, working on a produce farm, it's easy.
So, and you touched on a couple of different things, because when I work with my clients, trying to unpack what gets in the way. Right. And some of it is just simple education of not knowing what is available, or what do these fruits and vegetables taste like? What do you do with it? You walk into a supermarket and you see something that has, a rind on it, and you're thinking, well, how am I ever going to eat that? What do I do with that? Not knowing that, a watermelon could be just eaten fresh. It could go into a salad. It could be used as a gazpacho. That there's so many different things that you can do with just one simple piece of produce.
Exactly. And being able to extend that season, whether it's through dehydration or freezing or processing in a like minimal processed way, it's amazing what you can open people's eyes to. And like, I love working with, we have a youth program, and we work with youth about cucumbers, and the majority of them had no idea that you use a cucumber to make a pickle. And that you can do it in about 30 minutes. So it's just a wonderful way, again, to look at that continuum of what we talk about when we eat, from that production to the consumption of the food.
So how do you think your training as a dietitian has impacted how you farm food, or what have you brought? Because I know that you have only been part of the farm and the active presence in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. What changes have you brought with your expertise? So I think the value add that I have in the global Nourse Farm recipe for success is that when I first started working at the farm store, one of the questions that I would get from a lot of people, what can I do with this? Right? I don't really want to have just salad. It's like, okay, well, you can do lots of things. And so really, we started looking at it from the optic of what is it? What can I do with it? How do I store it? If I'm traveling, then what should I do with it? And then why should I be eating it? Like, what nutrients does it really have for my body? So we created food fact sheets on every different type of produce that we have, and we turned them into one-page PDF handouts, really, that are now on our website that people can just download and access very, very easily. That's so helpful.
Yes.
That's gold.
It is. And so then we would anchor certain we would anchor certain recipes then around a particular product. So it might be, right now it's strawberry season, and strawberries are just amazing to eat in and of themselves, but you can turn them into salsa. You can freeze them to make ice cream later. You can turn them into a vinaigrette dressing. And so getting people to think a little bit outside that box, to use whatever it is. And that's where I believe that my training really helped, in terms of allowing folks to see beyond the raw product and talking about food preparation and talking about cooking and talking about preservation. And that, I feel like, has been that value that I've put forward.
I mean, that's huge, because when I talk about meal planning, it's how to not be one and done. Yes. How do you continue to bring something forward? Mm-hmm. And you just listed, you start with this raw strawberry, but you can have 4 or 5 different things at a minimum, right, of what you can do with it, and bringing it, repurposing it. I call it menu mapping, repurposing it. It's basically how to reuse that same product over and over again, so that you don't come home and say, well, great, I have 3 pounds of strawberries. What am I going to do with them? Right. So how to always be thinking forward. Mm-hmm. What are the benefits of consuming locally grown fresh produce for our health and well-being?
Well, I don't know how much time we have.
That's okay.
I was thinking about this question a lot, and I think it really comes down to, first and foremost, when you are consuming things that are grown locally, that have fewer steps to your plate, there's just an enhanced freshness and an enhanced flavor to those products. And again, when we're talking about fruits and vegetables, that is so much more for the palate than when you get something that's imported from Chile or Mexico or even California. So you're going to get that boost of flavor and that boost of freshness. And again, to tie it back to what we talked about in terms of flavor and eating more, well, that's great when you think about fruits and vegetables, because you're going to increase your consumption, your overall eating of something, which again, you're going to also increase your overall nutrient intake. And the other, I guess, piece to it as well is that with the freshness and the flavor, the phytonutrient complement, the micronutrient in particular for things that are more easily lost in transportation. So when you think about your micronutrients, you're just getting a little bit more of those. And again, they're micronutrients. You don't need them in huge supply, but if you can get them and store some of them in your body, all the better for your body. I think when we think about so the personal health aspect is definitely there. When we think about the planet health, there's also the reduction in your overall carbon footprint, right? So when we think about things that are grown locally, you're typically going to have less packaging associated with it. A lot of fruits and vegetables come in their own packaging already.
Like, why is everything in plastic?
I don't know.
That's a whole, it's a whole other conversation that we can go down and talk about, but it's just like, why are these simple things in all this plastic? Why aren't we using, like I use stasher bags and other bags, so that I'm not using the plastic. It's something that is a pet peeve of mine. You miss so much just touching it. People think it can't touch your cart.
Yes, and today's World Environment Day, and it's all about plastic reduction. So there you are. But I think yes, when we think about overall, not just plastic reduction, but also it's not being trucked somewhere. So you're getting to come in
The carbon footprint.
Yeah, and so when you look at the carbon footprint, it's less packaging in general, it's less waste in general, and it's also the either plane or train or truck that's not being used the same way. And additionally, it's also being able to impact the hand that feeds you, if you will, right? You're able to have that dialogue with the farmer, with the food producer, and to find out, one, a little bit more about the food that you're eating, but two, also to leverage a little bit and say, hey, that tomato that I had was really great. What variety was this? Or, actually, it was a little bit bitter. Maybe there's something that could be tweaked. And so I think that it does afford eaters an opportunity to really leverage a lot of both person and planet health all in one.
It's community, it's connection, it's our environment. Yeah. I'm curious, and I don't know that you have the answer or not. Something that I often hear about is, does our fruits and vegetables have the same nutritional content that it did 100 years ago? Do we, vitamins, supplements, where does that all come in your opinion, if you have one?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that can be said about that. And I probably have different opinions depending on the day and depending on the food, right? We know that there are certain, let's take the example of an heirloom tomato. So we know that heirloom tomatoes are not necessarily just one tomato, right? That's a variety, that's a term that's used to describe many different varieties. And the idea is that the heirloom seed that's growing those tomatoes has not been hybridized. So over time, that seed itself is not any different than it was hundreds of years ago, making them the family heirloom, right? The treasure that you're going to get on your plate. That being said, we also know that the climate in which we're living isn't the same as 100 years ago. And so there are different scientific altercations or modifications that have been made to allow for plants to be altered in some way. We also know that there's just a natural flow to things, and plants themselves are going through changes based on responses to the environment. So I think that when you look at an individual product, it's a good way to approach that question. Like, what do I want to know about the origins of this particular asparagus or herb or fruit plant? And based on the seed or the seedling or the plant that might be produced in order to cultivate that food, you may be able to get a little bit more information from the orchardist or from the farmer to help you make that decision about how you want to choose your food. From the perspective of an individual, that's an individual choice, right? We also know that we need to feed billions of people by 2030. And with drought being what it is, and with war being what it is, there are different ways that we are going to have to probably rely on science to move us forward in order to simply stave off starvation. So I think it becomes a very different conversation when you're looking at a population and you're looking at a response to either a man-made issue or a natural disaster issue when you want to simply feed people in order to help save lives. So it's complicated, right? We all eat food.
We all need it, but it's not black and white.
Yeah.
How do we have enough food, and how do we, depending where you are, depending on what time of your life you are in, is going to create a different story and need of different information and different choices. Right. Going back to everybody has to make the best choice with the information that they have.
Right. And the rules, either they change, right? I think that's the important thing to remember, is that you might be cultivating something in your kitchen garden that is appropriate for that particular container, but it may not work at a large scale. And so that just understanding that is really, really important.
So, in your work, you're really looking not only at what's happening at this moment in time, but you are also so collectively as a farm looking at what is happening in the world around us.
Yeah, and how our environment is rapidly changing, and how to respond to that when people still want what they want when they want it. It may or may not be a reality given what last year was a terrible drought, right? We were all struck by the limited amount of water that we had in Massachusetts.
It's interesting because my partner and I hike all the time, and we love to forage for mushrooms.
Yeah.
We go on mushroom hunts, him more than I do. And, the year before was just unbelievable.
Right.
We had more mushrooms than we knew what to do with. And then last summer, it was disappointing that we didn't have the variety and the colors that we were having. And fortunately, and if you are going, picking mushrooms, make sure that you know what you are picking, because there's definitely some black and white information there. So I don't want to go, I want to make sure that is stated, that we really take a lot of time to make sure that we know what we are eating. In what ways does the farm-to-table concept align with your vision of promoting health and wellness through food?
So I think the whole concept with farm to table is being able to take what is being harvested that day, that moment in time, and turning it into something that is delicious, nutritious, and appropriate for what your palate might be, right? And I live with two other people, and we all approach food very differently.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. But at the same time, knowing what's going to be harvested is a great way to start with, all right, well, we know this is going to be harvested this week. How are we going to work it into our plate at our table? And we have that same concept when we're designing the menu at the food truck. And I use that approach when I'm working with my clients and my patients as well, because it is a really easy way to let Mother Nature dictate a little bit of what's available, that takes some of the guesswork out of, well, what's for dinner tonight, right? And so we're able to really look at that. We may not always like it, but I think that's where some of that curiosity comes into play with, well, I may not like it as a salad, but maybe I like it roasted or toasted or air fried or however prepared.
And you just touched on something that's really interesting, that question, what's for dinner? Because the sky is the limit. I'm going on the premise that you can afford to have your food and to make those choices, and not everybody does have those choices. And I want to make sure that we are aware of that. In this context, it is helpful though, because it takes away from that big, huge picture and asking a smaller question as to what's naturally available today. And then all of a sudden the choices are not so overwhelming. Right. And you could say, okay, here is ABC. What can I do with A, B, or C?
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, right? When seasonally, all right, I've got 5 different brassicas to choose from, a couple of fruits, and then you're able to build. And today was a great example. The last few days have been really chilly, whereas the end of last week was really quite warm. Right. And so we had a huge shift in terms of, all right, well, I know that I'm going to have all of these greens available, but I'm not really
feeling it.
Exactly.
Because I saw you did chili.
Yeah,
I was looking on social media, so we're dating the show. But all of a sudden I saw the weather has changed. I shifted.
Yeah.
Let's use what's here. How do we use what's here and turn it into an appropriate food for the environment of what we are experiencing today?
Exactly. So we were able to use a lot of the bell peppers and onions that we froze over the winter to put into at the height of the flavors harvest. And then we were able to put that into the chili that we made, and it worked really well.
So question for you, and freezing peppers. Talk about what vegetables can be frozen. How can we repurpose those so that we can use what's available now tomorrow? Yeah,
so I'm a big believer in extending the season because one of the things I learned in moving to Massachusetts is there are 4 distinct seasons.
There are.
Winter seems like the longest. But one way that I have really learned to enjoy winter is through soups. And so a lot of the summer harvest, right, where we have just amazing peppers, tomatoes, corn, all of the squashes, we will in fact we'll blanch those, we'll freeze them. I'll even do them in 1 cup measure freezes so that on those cold winter nights, I can just put it into the crock pot, or now it's all the Instapot, but you can put it into a pot of some sort and really just kind of let it go. But again, it's the flavors locked in. I find, in terms of answering your question, I find that for the most part, I will freeze most vegetables. Aside from, I won't necessarily do lettuces. Those just don't rehydrate very well.
No.
And they don't really taste that great in soups. But any of the summer squashes, any of the tomatoes, any of the peppers, corn, all of the winter squashes. I'm trying to think what else. Kale, Swiss chard. I think I have probably 8 different bags of kale and Swiss chard ready for a soup for later in the fall. And it's just a great way. Again, you're getting something at the height of the flavor, you're locking it in, and then you're allowing to cut down on your food bills in the winter.
In the future, going forward.
Yeah.
And do you have cheat sheets? I know that you said you have all these PDFs. Do you have sheets on how to freeze these vegetables?
Yeah, so on our food fact sheets that we do have on the website, we do tell you how to store it, both fresh and if you're going to process it, whether it's frozen or dehydrated. We have fewer things that we talk about dehydrating because people tend to not have as much time.
It's another step.
Yeah. Whereas like freezing it, there's a lot of forgiveness in freezing it and putting it in a soup.
Right, and it's knowing that when you freeze these foods, what types of things, and we've been talking specifically about going into soups. You're not going to want to put frozen peppers into your salad. It's going to be disappointing.
Right.
But everything has a different purpose, and when you understand and educate yourself, you can extend that season and to get that extra flavor. What does plant forward mean?
Yeah, so plant forward, sometimes people will think of it as plant-centric, or it's really putting plants at the forefront of what you're going to consume, to eat, to enjoy. And we, again, going back to understanding that we know folks need to eat more fruits and vegetables. So if you start with the plants, and in this sense, we're really talking about fruits and vegetables. We know that grains are a plant too. But when we think about the broader categories, if you start there and build everything else around it, person and planet health win. And so our way of defining it, because there's no true definition of it, but the way that we've chosen to define it at Veg Out is really putting plants at the center of the meal or of the menu item. And it works well. Again, we work at a produce farm.
Right. But it's also, generally, healthier to be able to build your meal around those fruits and vegetables and then adding in the other components. And I work a lot with mindful eating. Just the color on the plate changes, which changes your perception on what you're eating and being present with it and your enjoyment level of food. That it really makes such a huge difference.
Well, and I think that's a really important point. We eat so much with our eyes and our noses even before we have the good fortune of tasting something with our mouths. And so when you are able to be that excited about what's on your plate or in your bowl or in your mug early on, it's really wonderful. And then when the olfactory senses are working with you as well, that's another great I'm ready to eat kind of cue that your body gets. And then when you're able to taste it and chew it, it's even more.
And, a great experiment is for somebody to go into the supermarket and think about what they're touching, seeing, and smelling versus walking into your farm and the scent that you get when you have just picked something, that it just overtakes you and your mouth starts to water just by that smell or by the visual of what your expectation of what it's going to taste like.
I'm laughing, Lisa, because yesterday I walked into the walk-in refrigerator to get out onions to make something else, and I was overtaken by the fragrance of the strawberries. And there were just boxes and boxes of strawberries that have been picked, getting ready for the rain. But it was really, really such a joy to have that fragrant.
It makes you happy.
Yeah, I was like, I know what I'm having for dinner.
Something with strawberries.
Yeah, so it really is special.
So tell me, how do you use the seasonal calendar to create recipes and menu items?
So we really focus on a few key harvest items. So when we think about the seasons, right, it is the 4 distinct seasons in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources has a great seasonal calendar on their website that gives you when something is anticipated, and then also how long that season will extend. So that's really nice from a planning standpoint. So we're able to really look at, all right, well, what is going to need to be best consumed fresh, right? Because there are certain things that just taste better fresh. And then what can you actually process, and how do you want to process it? Is it that you need to blanch it and freeze it? Is it that you need to actually cook it a little bit and then can it or jar it? Or is it that you need to turn it into something completely different? And so when we think about that, it's also how much time do you have to do all of that too? And so one of the things that I'll do when I'm working with clients in particular is we'll look at, all right, what do you really have time to do? Is it that you really just have time to wash something, throw it into a freezer container and put it into your freezer and pull it out later? Or do you have a day of the week that you do more of your batch cooking, right? And so you kind of get ready for the week. And so then what can be a fresh pepper stick one day can be turned into a hummus the next day, etc. And so really looking at it from the versatility of whatever's being harvested. Certain seasons obviously lend themselves to greater harvest, right? We know that August, September are just bumper crops of things here. So thinking about that is definitely a driver in terms of what we will do in processing things, whether it's just washing or chopping or cutting, or the food processor can be your best friend when you're in a crunch. But we really do look at ways to infuse enjoyment of food in that season. And June is wonderful for strawberries, for greens of all kinds. Sweet peas are coming in. The asparagus is starting to dwindle because that's the month of May.
It's going.
And just really getting to know the superstars of the months, I think, is important. And then how you can freeze a little bit, or even, again, process it, pickle it for a little bit later in the time frame.
It really helps with understanding how long fresh produce will last in your refrigerator.
Yes.
It helps with meal planning if you kind of remove the angst and the stress of thinking about meal planning, because some people are kind of like, oh no, like it's out of my control, I don't know what to do with it. When you become educated, and especially because you have all that information, when you buy a few things, knowing that this thing needs to be eaten in the next day or two, you have a little bit more life of this, and your watermelon can sit on your counter for a week and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I think, during COVID, I think some people got a little bit more savvy and understanding when we had to go shopping for 2 weeks at a time because we didn't want to go out.
Right.
And it made such a difference on helping people understand how to, what they have to use right now and how to stretch it out so that there's always something fresh and different and enjoyable.
Well, and I think along that line too, which is really, you can eat the same base thing different ways with
Absolutely.
a few tweaks, and herbs are a great way to do that. I think that's one of the biggest categories of items with which I work with a lot of my clients, is like, you can have a little pot of herbs and it can change the flavor complexity of a dish really, really easily, and still be great for your health too.
And it helps to get, because some people are, I don't eat leftovers.
Yeah.
Many people don't understand that the leftovers don't have to look exactly like it did last night.
Exactly.
And sometimes, there's nothing wrong with last night's dinner.
Yeah.
If you have a crazy day, sometimes it is okay. And, there are very small shifts that you can tweak it. But I will work with some of my clients and they'll be like, but my partner or my husband won't eat leftovers. Let's figure out how we can shift it so that they don't even know that there's a leftover in there. It's just another ingredient that's being used.
Yeah.
What is community-supported agriculture, or also known as a CSA?
Yeah, so community-supported agriculture, or CSA, is a way to really connect community members with farmers. And so in the broad sense of it, it's basically saying, from a community member standpoint, you, or one, is going to invest upfront in the future harvest of a farm. And oftentimes, again, using New England as our base, we'll see that the months of January and February are lean months for farms, right? There's not a lot going on usually, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And so if the community can support agriculture in these leaner months by giving an upfront pre-order and pre-payment, then the farmer is able to, in fact, buy the seeds, plan an effective crop calendar, and then the community member can come later once the harvest is ready, and reap the benefits of the harvest.
I'm familiar with CSAs. I never really made the connection of the original purpose of where it came from.
Yeah, so it truly is a community supporting a farmer and supporting local agriculture, because the community members are saying, hey, we believe in what's going to happen, and we're invested in our own food system.
I never knew that connection. I always just saw I have access to the farm and I get all these amazing fruits and vegetables, and who doesn't want to do that? Yeah. And what a wonderful way to be able to support our local farms that are so important to our community and education.
No, it's an incredible experience. And there are different models, right, that are followed. So I think that's the other piece that's really interesting, because the different farms have different pickups or work shares, or pick your own farmers market styles. So there are different models across, but it really is a great way for the community to give support to that farmer.
Well, I think now that people really understand what that comes from, that hopefully they will continue to support it, because it's such a needed effort. I love your catchy phrase, veg out at Nourse Farm. Tell me about how you engage with the local community to promote the healthy eating habits.
So again, from our standpoint, it's all about the food. And when we were coming up with the name for the food truck, we wanted food trucks are very punny. So we needed something that was catchy. And because the majority of what we have on our menu is produce, but also are vegetables. We kept kind of getting into the vegetable category. And I was like, well, we want this to be fun. We want it to be casual. We want people to feel comfortable. And as a child of the 80s, you vegged out. So
that's where it came from.
So I had a focus group. There were 5 different names that we were looking at, but veg out was heads and shoulders above all the other ones. So you too can veg out at Nourse Farm and enjoy fun and yummy food.
You just continue to bring your warmth and your humor to all of it. It's awesome. Are there any specific initiatives or educational programs that Nourse Farm uses to improve health and wellness through food?
Yeah, so we look at it from 2 optics. We look at kind of the passive way to do it, and we look at it from the active way to do it. And so from our passive way, we have our We have a Food Matters section on our website where people can go and get the food facts, recipes. And then I've had the good fortune of working with Framingham State dietetic interns over time. And we've designed 2 different cookbooks that people can download. Again, yeah, it's great. We did the food facts, we did the recipe, and then we did the nutrition behind it. So that's available on our website. We also, on our monitor at the food truck at Veg Out, we have a screen that we run. We run different slides about the different produce, but also about the different options that you can eat at Veg Out. And so we let people know, hey, this is how you can eat asparagus, and this is how you can eat it at Veg Out, and this is how you can eat it at home. So while you're standing in line, you still have that passive opportunity to get information.
And what I love is not only are you helping people in that present moment, you're also thinking about how to bring it home, how to continue to bring that cycle out to the rest of the world and allow everybody, whether they're in there at that moment in time, to be able to be participatory in vegging out.
Yeah. So that's our passive one. And then actively, we do different I call them a little bit of edutainment, but they're really educational opportunities for different groups that can host events with us. I also do public speaking in the community. I had a great session with the Westborough Garden Club last fall where we did the history of the sweet potato, and then they sampled 3 different ways. That wasn't just a baked sweet potato or a sweet potato fry. And that was really fun. And then we host school groups. We hosted Mass Ag in the Classroom teachers for a professional development opportunity, because we do have our event tent that's a nice leftover, if you will, from our celebratory event last year, where we're able to do cooking demos. We have an eco-foodie adventure program that we're launching this year for local youth, where we're looking at the local food system. And then we also have, this is probably a little bit in the active and a little bit in the passive category, our social media. So we do a lot of ways that we either show people how to make what we're making at the truck, or ways that they can adapt it in their own home environment.
So we're not keeping any secrets.
No.
You want everybody to be able to
Yes.
take what they have and to recreate it, repurpose it, love it, enjoy it, share it.
Exactly. There's no secret sauce.
Why does everyone love Pick Your Own?
Oh gosh, I think the magic of coming to a point of production, whether it's your own or someone else's, and getting to choose exactly which berry or apple or pumpkin or flower that you want, there's just something special about that. And it's, again, it speaks to that connectivity that when people understand that you do have to bend down to pick a strawberry. Back might be sore tomorrow. There's pride in doing that, and there's purpose in that selection process. And to come out and have this container, this quart, or this giant bowl, or I think I saw somebody yesterday with 30 pounds of strawberries.
I want to go to their house
I
and know what they're doing with it.
I'll be over for shortcake later. But I think there's a real appreciation, because again, we all eat food. And so being able to participate in some part of that.
It tastes better when you pick it yourself.
It does.
And it's amazing just listening to the conversation of what happens when you do pick your own and you're listening to everybody's experience. And I notice my own conversation if I'm with friends or when my kids were little and we picked our own, and why they would gravitate towards one and not want another one. And then somebody would feel bad that, it's a little, imperfect. And then they'd want to go back to get it because it wasn't, they didn't want it to be left alone on the little plant.
Yeah.
So there's so many different stories that happen within Pick Your Own.
Yeah.
I understand you have a favorite food joke.
Oh, I do. Well, I have many, but.
So for today, what's your favorite one?
So I suppose that given everything that we've talked about in this context, the one that's most appropriate is, why is it hard to keep a secret on the farm? Well, it's threefold. 1, the potatoes have eyes, the corn has ears, and the celery stalks. But I don't want you to keep it a secret. I want you to go out to your local farm and talk to the farmer.
That is one I have not heard. And it reminds me of, I work with a community up in Maine for my motivational interviewing practice. And the gentleman's name is Stephen Andrews, and everything he does and every Zoom, every piece of literature that goes out always has a joke. And now I finally have one that I can share with him that I am sure he has not heard.
Oh, well, good.
Before you tell us about this week's practice, are there any other words of wisdom that you would like to share?
I suppose it goes back to something that you started the segment with is being curious and being open, because you never know what a particular product might taste like. You never know what you can add to it to kind of make it your own. You never know what magic might actually just be waiting for the next bite. And so being curious, it's great to be selective and it's great to have favorites, but I think being curious about things is really important, because you never know. You don't want to know what you don't know. And I think that's really true in terms of food, and just because something shows up one way doesn't mean that it has to stay in that particular form in order for you to get enjoyment from it, in order for you to get nourishment from it, and to really let it be a big part of your own meal or plate or experience with food.
And, with fruits and vegetables, they all have different flavors. Mm-hmm. You can have, 2 tomatoes and they're going to taste different. Learning to be curious of what you like, what you don't like, what makes you like something. Sharing that, encouraging your children to be able to explore. It's not, when you go into a museum, it's don't touch. Right. When you go to a farm, it is, touch, smell, taste, all of those things. Right. And it's such a beautiful education of connecting with your food and your body.
Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah, we always say, yes, come play with your food.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us about the practice for the week.
So one of the things when we were preparing for this segment today, I started thinking about it, and it really is, as a dietitian, a lot of times we're seen as the food police, and I don't think of myself that way at all.
I have to say, because I have come from being the food police. Yeah. And that is something that we have always connected on, is our approach to health and wellness, and that we really want to get rid of that black and white thinking, all or nothing. So there is a group of dietitians that are really breaking away from that old school mentality, and you are just on the forefront of it all.
Yeah. So really the practice that I use in working with clients, and actually just working with myself and working with my family, is the add-on, right? Not to eliminate. Now, elimination has its own purpose and everything, but if you look at adding on, and again, we're talking about fruits and vegetables, so adding on a fruit or adding on a vegetable, that's really the approach to take. And my son's favorite add-on, right, because he loves tortilla chips. And I'm like, fine, eat tortilla chips, but add on a fruit salsa or a veggie salsa. My husband loves Greek yogurt, so his add-on is a berry or some kind of fruit to add on those servings that we know that are so important for our overall health. We tend to add on vegetables and fruits even in some of the beverages that we'll have. I'm a big add-on in soup. I'm like, add on one more in the soup.
We're always adding in extra fruits and vegetables, because that's just what we love to eat. Right. That's just part of our way of life. And if there's something extra in the refrigerator, we're kind of like, oh, that could just go in there.
That's a good sauce.
Yeah, like spinach and mushrooms, those things can easily just be added on. And most of the time, if you have a picky eater, they don't even know that it's in there. So sometimes the add-on, you don't even need to tell them that that's being added on. Right. Sometimes, it's just less is more. Yeah. But there's always, what a great way to be able to expand and not have to focus on the restriction of what you can't have, but more about what you can have.
So that's our approach, is the add-on. And it seems to work, because it seems more positive, first of all, and it definitely isn't telling somebody what not to do. So you're just able to add on.
People like autonomy.
Yeah.
As soon as you tell them what not to do, they get their ankles up and don't want to do it. And we've all learned from experience that giving people the choice of what they can add on will make such a huge positive impact. And so thank you so much for being my guest today. We have learned about how you and Nourse Farm support our environment and community with locally grown produce, how to eat seasonally, and the joy of eating plant forward. Be sure to visit Catherine at her food truck, Veg Out at Nourse Farm in Westborough, Massachusetts. If you want to continue the conversation, please join me for my monthly office hours and my conversations where we continue the conversations that we are having here. I also invite you to send me an email, tell me about your success, potential challenges that you may be experiencing, and how I can support you. I would also love to hear your ideas of what type of topics and guests we would like to continue to unpack in this space. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Getting Healthy Without Rules.